Pastor Kirk, Pastor Terry, welcome to Talking Church. So glad to have you. You've both been on before. Pastor Kirk, you wore that shirt the last time you were on. Don't have many shirts.
This is uniform.
That is true.
Uniform.
I said I wouldn't mention it, and then I opened it.
You asked if I could do this, and I put on my podcast shirt. This is what I wear.
Okay, so I have a question for you guys because Kirk has to get out of here to get to a haircut.
I do have a haircut.
So you've heard the phrase, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Is that true? And is it always true?
Oh, thanks for looking at me. No, that's great. I think it depends on the circumstance. I think if you have planned your life well enough and equipped yourself well enough, then if a circumstance pops up where you don't have time to plan, you can handle it well. But there had to be some kind of building in your life before that to handle an in-the-moment thing.
You had to schedule a haircut with your wife.
You couldn't just spontaneously walk in.
To be honest, I didn't schedule it. She texted me, said, does 1:30 work? And I was like, I think I could maybe work that. So I'm going to go get it. I didn't technically plan the haircut. It's a bad example. There are two camps of planning and making stuff happen. One is being super strategic and in advance. The other is flying by the seat of your pants. Terry, which way are you wired?
I 100% have plans on plans on plans on plans. If A, B, and C
nothing
fail,
but options.
Nothing but options all the way. And I like it because I hate failing and I hate having to redo something over. What about you?
I lean the other way. This is why
That's
you
why-
asked
That's
this
why
next.
we're in here.
You're starting to see it.
Here's what I'd say, and we can get spiritual as well, and I'm sure you'll tie this in, but like, what way does the Lord work and what way does the Holy Spirit work? And charismatics have a really bad rap of going like, oh, the Holy Spirit said, and that's an excuse to not plan. I think the Holy Spirit works in far advance, and he works instantaneous in the moment and in surprise ways, which is awesome. So I think it's both and, not one is good or evil. I definitely lean in the excitement of, I don't know what's happening today, but I'm pumped for it.
What, Terry, what about planning makes you like how are you wired in that way to where it feels like I want to be this way? Do you need to be that way? Is it kind of like an OCD? Like I need to know what's happening?
I am a little OCD, so if you are as well, that's okay.
No, I'm not OCD. There's two motivators. Number one is stewardship. If I'm given something, I want to make sure I do it to the best of my ability and give it every effort I can so I can get that, well done, good and faithful servant. It says in Proverbs that the hands of the diligent prosper. And that includes planning and everything else. The other side of it is I want to live in a reality to where we can live in the experience of what good planning can bring. And the quicker I can plan and the better I can plan, the quicker we can get to the fun. And so I just don't want to live my life with 2 years of experience because of poor planning and not ever experience what's on the other side. I want to make sure I steward it well and I leave room for God to do what he wanted to do because of that stewardship.
Practically, how far, obviously there's initiatives that we plan for, like, hey, we want to launch a new service or we want to launch a new campus. Obviously there needs to be planning involved with those things. There needs to be communication. And then there's kind of our own life of planning in itself. When you think of new initiatives that you're launching, maybe someone's listening and they have like a new department they want to start, or again, a new campus they want to launch. What are you thinking of? How do you determine how quickly can I get that started? Or is that even the right question to be asking right away?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends. Sometimes there's this thing called blitz scaling where you just scale as fast as you can with the right people in the room and make whatever mistakes you need to make, but very quickly. I love that. That's one of the most fun ways of planning and scaling there is. However, if we're starting an initiative or something, I'm thinking of who needs to be in the room, what resources do we need in place, and how long is it going to take me to develop those people in order to steward those resources well. And that gap is planning. That's all it is. And so it's just really identifying what the gap is between identifying the resources, identifying the people, and helping the people understand how to use those resources.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the challenge is when you leave a meeting and you all have different ideas of what resources need to go into it. Kirk, you, me, and AJ were in a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about a plan, and you said, great, let's do it. Okay, I think we need to get some approvals on that. I think we need to, connect on that. But it's like, that's your MO. It's like, all right, what's holding us back? Let's do it. And those things exist. You're executive pastor on our team. We're all three on our leadership team. We know that there are budget issues, there's HR issues, there's all sorts of things. But but when you're saying that, like, what goes through your brain when you go, we're finishing up with the meeting, like, done, let's do it. Maybe externally process that.
Yeah, first I'll say I agree with Terry completely that planning is a stewardship issue, and then also doing something on the spot can also be an aspect of stewardship as well. There are many pastoral examples of in a service that we have a plan for how we're leading a service in church, but God's doing something that we didn't plan for, or we have a sense in the room, or there's a good example. We had a youth pastor on staff years ago that prepared an offering moment to kind of share around giving, and they had an object lesson, and they were ready to. That was their soul. They had this plan for the offering moment, but we had a video right before the offering moment that kind of hit differently in the room than anybody was expecting or planning. And that youth pastor actually wasn't even aware there was a video prior in the service. And so that was poor planning. But they had their plan going, I'm going to do this object lesson, By the time they went up there to do it, it couldn't have been a worse, like, gear shifting in the room of like, dude, there was no awareness that you need to drop your plan and respond to what we just saw, how it's feeling in the room, and kind of pastor the moment in a different way than your plan. So I think part of stewardship as well is to say, we are going to make plans as leaders. We need to. I'm not wired that way necessarily. And I don't know, I would love to hear your thoughts too. I don't know if this is true, but like, I think there's like, getting a vision is one thing that initiates the start of planning. And then in planning and architecting, I would say Pastor Terry is one of the best architects, like ministry designers, architect, future thinking, and everything that he shared about his skill set. And then also there's like a let's go do it. Let's get to it. So vision, architecting, and then executing, like getting after it. Let's go. I feel like my skill set is a little bit more ideating, new idea. Most of the time I want to skip all the architecting and go like, let's just try, and that can be good or not good. Another example that I think about is this phrase, like the stuff of heroes. And not to put me on a pedestal or anybody, but I do think like, man, for such a time as this, why am I here? What is God doing? And you can have that mindset in architecting, building something, World War II, the people that were behind, positive or negative, behind building the atomic bomb, like there, how much planning, how much resource, how much, there's so much architecting that goes around this huge thing that can affect an entire war. And then there's also the story of the battle at Midway, where this guy in his plane takes off and is like, I need to get back. I'm going to run out of gas. Or I could ditch the plan and go a little bit further on a gut instinct. He chooses, I'm going to go a little bit further because I see something glaring off in the sun. I'm butchering the story and fast forwarding, but he sees this reflection out, like way out there, and he and his few planes go and they find the entire Japanese naval fleet. And in 5 minutes, and there's a documentary on Netflix about the Battle of Midway. In 5 minutes, World War II was won against Japan because of this one guy's ditching the plan, gut instinct. I see something off in the distance. I'm going to run out of gas if I go for it, but I'm going to go for it. And I think that that's something that I feel just in me. I'm for planning. I realize I'm not wired the same way, and I just get excited about like, what if God is in this, and what if we need to do it? Like, what if we need to do it today? So it's not right or wrong. I think I live more as an executive pastor. I live more in planning. So if what do I spend my time and life? It's much more in planning, in meeting after meeting after meeting. And so I just get this thrill and this excitement of like, but we could try something now today. And so I don't know. I just try to lean into that, even though planning is probably more important. Sorry, that's long-winded.
Yeah, I think the thing that's hard about the spontaneity is obviously your track record. when that example is awesome. But what happens if in that example he went and they ran out of gas and they all crashed their planes,
right.
you know? And it's
which
like,
happens more often than that.
Yeah. And so I think that like, or in a sports analogy, you know, maybe less life and death, but we ran the play. You see it all the time, like football. Like I decided to run that play and I called the play different than what my coach was telling me to do. Or the coach, you know, changes at last minute and goes against the strategy of what they were doing. And then it kind of flies in their face. They lose the game. It was the play didn't work out. We have to have both, right?
Absolutely.
We have to be willing to adjust. And again, it's keeping in the vein of sports. It's like they made halftime adjustments. Right. They figured out what was going on. But when you're thinking about this, like initiating a plan, I don't know if it might be helpful to even think of like a scenario or examples, maybe even in real examples in ministry. But how do you know? I think there's a few questions, and you can take it through different veins. But how do you know the plan is ready to be implemented?
Right.
And then you were talking about adjustments along the way, but maybe going back to there, you've come up with some sort of plan. How do we know it's ready to at least we're ready to try it versus it's not ready yet?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think we have to live in the tension of, if you're an ultimate planner, sometimes people who all fall in love with the plan have contempt for people who just want to like fire, ready, aim. And the people who are fire, ready, aim think the people that plan like just to hold things back. What I think is important sometimes in people that are like mired in the planning vein, start something quick and just execute. I mean, how bad can failure be? Especially if you're designing something from the beginning. But it's important to understand that there's only so much clarity you're going to have before you launch an initiative, before you need faith on the other side. I believe, and I've said it before, but I believe that clarity can be the enemy of faith. Because if you have 100% clarity, you don't need to rely on God for anything. So if the only way to please God is through faith, Hebrews 11, why would he give you a vision that requires clarity, 100% clarity? He wouldn't. That means you have leaders in the church sitting around waiting on clarity that's never going to come. At some point, you got to ask yourself, how much faith am I willing to run with here, and how much risk am I willing to manage? And if you're a higher competency leader and capacity leader, you don't need a whole lot of clarity, because you know you have the goods and the goods in your team to fix it along the way. And if you have that, I say launch. I say go and manage the risk along the way, as long as stewardship isn't called into question in the process. I was thinking of a in-the-moment planning that we didn't have time for. I was with Pastor Rob at a church planning conference, and none of us were thinking of being on stage, but we were asked last minute to get up and for me to interview him about Kingdom Builders. We had 30 minutes. And when I want to interview Pastor Rob in front of a bunch of global leaders, I don't want 30 minutes. I want 30 days. And yet I had 30 minutes. So we're like live texting each other what we're going to say. Pastor Rob is cleaning up my questions. I'm pushing back. And then we get into it and we just go. And the biggest thing I knew is I knew how to guide a conversation well enough. I knew Pastor Rob, if you get him on a train that he's passionate about, will take the whole thing in the best direction. And I trusted in the competency of the people on the stage. And it ran. And so I think you can only wait on clarity for so long before you have to jump off in faith and then trust in what is in the team.
Yeah, Kirk, you're notorious for leaning over to somebody a few minutes before and saying, hey, you go do that prayer moment. You go do that. It's kind of this idea of be ready in season, out of season. Like you never know when that's going to be. Talk through moments like that. Maybe there's been a moment where that didn't go well, or a moment where you felt like, I don't know if that was the right decision to make. Or I guess it could be the opposite too. I love that example of like you as the planner, hey, not as much.
Yep.
I don't know if you can think of examples. It doesn't have to be about that, but that maybe can help people process, okay, maybe that wasn't the best move.
Yeah. I think it's bad if I'm doing that every week, during a service and dishing out assignments while we're in the middle of service to, hey, you go up and do offering, you go up and do prayer for needs, you go up and do communion. I think it's bad if I'm doing that because there was no plan. I think it can be fine if you're calling audibles. There was a plan and we're calling live audibles based on whatever intuition or leadership decision or whatever. I think it can be good or not good. I think as a younger leader, you're doing that in immaturity and lack of planning. As an older leader, I see value in kind of what Terry just explained. There's so much value in a leader getting a curveball and saying, hey, you're up in 30 minutes. Yep. and let's see what you got in you. Not just to let's see, but like we got to do this. I remember traveling also with Pastor Rob, and he was consulting at a church in Kansas City, and there was a ministry there that was going to film 6 videos. Pastor Rob was going to teach 6 videos on generosity, and they were 5 to 10 minute videos each. And when we got there, the leader of this ministry goes, "Oh, and you're a campus pastor. Would you be interested in filming 6 videos on how to lead a campus, how to start a campus?" And I was like, I don't know if it's gonna be good or not, but I'm happy to help and serve in whatever way I can. And you get in front of a camera again. It might have been 30 minutes later where you're like, 6 modules of like teaching how to be a campus pastor. And it turned out stepping into that and having a little bit of like, God, I need you, because I don't want to just talk about nothing. I want it to be valuable. And then and those videos turn out great and to benefit other churches and other pastors. And I've gotten feedback from other people that have watched those videos that were encouraged by that. I go, dude, that was not months of planning. That was like in the moment. And so, I think for me, our organization and the way we are as multi-site and being an executive pastor, if everybody's like me, we're getting nothing done. But I love that about the body of Christ. I get to work with Pastor Terry, and he's gifted. We have certain similarities in our gift mix and certain differences in different wirings. And so there's a gift that Pastor Terry brings to make sure we're thinking, what does that mean 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? If we're here or we're not here, what happens if you leave 3, there's a conversation about something we're building right now. Well, what happens if either one of us are gone in 6 months or 2 years? And does that can everything that we built? Should we build it in a different way that doesn't revolve around us being in front of a camera or us teaching? I think that's super valuable. And so you build your team in a way that not everybody has the same gift mix and temperament.
Yeah, I love Dr. Hoskins has a teaching on that. And I know, Terry, we've both done this program, but he talked about the 3 different types of leaders that you need in order to make things happen in an organization. And I'm not getting the names exactly right, but there's basically you need a charismatic heart leader, catalyst, and then you need a like a leadership gift or a
strategist.
The strategy gift, and then the activator. And so that combination to say there's somebody who carries the heart, that carries the vision, the mission, it just oozes out of them. And for One Hope, which is where Dr. Hoskins is the president of, his dad's that way. But then for him, he's more the strategic leader. And then they have Marwan, who's their activator. And I think in every organization, I don't think it has to be at an executive level either. I think that can be implemented to say, if everyone is all heart, then you don't have the strategic insight to say, I don't know if that's really going to meet the goals of what we're trying to accomplish. It might be a fun event. I mean, how many times are we talking about events we do? Every event's amazing. But we're really starting to have these conversations about just because it's amazing and feeling doesn't mean that it's actually a strategic win for our organization. The same is true with, we can come up with the best strategic plan possible, but it's not able to be implemented. Then it's just a waste of time and resources because we're planning. And then, of course, if you're just trying to activate without the planning, without the heart of the mission, then you're just a busybody, and all you're doing is doing things that aren't moving the needle. And so I love that analogy that kind of helps put frameworks around, okay, we need a strategist, we need an activator, we need a catalyst that are going to lead this way. And I think in our organization, we maybe don't have one of each, we have several of each.
Absolutely.
And I think you can be like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think Pastor Rob has elements of all 3.
He does.
But definitely if you pick one, he's a catalyst. Like no doubt. He's a heart leader.
I think you guys both have all 3, but you guys are very strategic, both of you. And I see massive value. And I'll always be the person that's like, let's try something new. It's like, even if it's not strategic, and so that's what I value, the strategic aspect. Would you say strategy is your strongest?
I would say it's my strongest, and I wonder sometimes if it's been my strongest because it's been the biggest need in the room throughout my life.
In
other areas,
you're around a lot of heart leaders.
If I'm around a lot of strategy leaders, oh my gosh, I'm all heart and I love it. Oh, can I just be that? So it just kind of slides the spectrum, but I think I've grown most in that simply because of the leaders I've been around, and I think that's great. And to your point, your dad is all 3, and I think a good CEO or lead is all 3. But he definitely leads in that catalyst vein. for sure.
Yeah, when it comes to like an idea and that isn't working, and I think we've talked more ministry focused because Pastor Rob and I did one that was more personal scheduling and the calendar hacks episode that's been really helpful. So if people are listening and they're wanting more of like the personal management and planning, I think that would be a good resource for them to listen to. But when it comes to making these decisions about initiatives that we've been doing, I think a lot of times the planning goes out the window because it's just rinse and repeat. Oh, well, we've done this before, let's do it again. And so the planning, instead of going to what you did at the beginning, which is who is this event for, or who is this ministry trying to reach, or how will we know if this ministry is effective? You did all those things at the beginning, but if a ministry's been going for 15 years, maybe you took over a church, or maybe you're new in your organization and your department has just been doing this thing, and that's just what we do. Well, you no longer you no longer ask those questions. You're now basically just asking, how do we do what we do again
in a refreshed way that keeps engagement.
And so how have we how do you guys think about the ministries that you oversee, the campuses that you're working with, to not just say, oh, how do we do Easter the best way, versus no, how do we actually see true real change happen? And sometimes it is by doing the same thing, but other times it's by making changes.
I think sometimes we get addicted to precedence, and precedence keeps us from relevance. Sometimes we're too well equipped and too engineered to meet the needs of a generation that existed yesterday and not meeting the needs of the people in our seats. And so we try to rechurn over and over the things that used to work for us. And because of that, all of our planning gears goes towards that. We even have ways that we plan that met needs yesterday that don't meet needs today. And I think the minute that, because we did it before and it worked, starts to be the biggest value on the table is the minute everything needs to be broken and changed. And that's where I think good planning can get you from one to the other. It's lazy planning or lack of planning that just gets you mired in precedence. And so for me, when I'm thinking of an initiative, is it too redundant? Do we need 5 of these events per year? Is it even meeting needs? Are people asking for this? Are there people in our demographics that we're reaching going to other churches that are giving things that they need? And should we be listening to that? And so when it comes to planning each of our areas, I think one of the most important things is taking out the ceiling of precedence and saying, how does this help us to see around the corner? And then develop everybody to almost unteach them the things that they learned to do to meet needs yesterday, and give them the capacities and competencies that they need to meet those needs today. Then once that happens, then you can start talking about events and initiatives and everything else.
There's a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I think that is true for the most part. I think it also could be true that what got you here, run it again, and it could get you there. And we talk about organizational maturity, and even in ministry, to develop a play, run the play, and actually believe in it, that you run it for a long enough period of time to get better data to better assess whether or not it works, versus changing and changing again and changing again. The saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think you could also say, if it's not broke, break it. You know, it is very situational. And me personally, I assess it. I do my best to assess each situation with data. And is it the right, are we measuring the right metrics? You know, did we set the right goals? Am I looking at the right data? But then also, again, this is just me personally, and strategic leaders, might respect this part less, not you guys, but just in general, that there is a gut feeling. There is like this, there's this feeling, whether it's through prayer or discernment or just, I wouldn't go to that. I wouldn't want to be like, I did it, I'm not, and God put me in this position. Let's change it. So sometimes it is like a gut feeling, but you try to make those decisions with data and what are you sensing about it? So
what's interesting, I find myself to be very analytical in how I look at if it's working or not. Like the metrics would show that. But what may surprise people is Pastor Rob is actually more anecdotal, I would say, than analytical. And you may say, well, that's a bad thing to be. But I think what he's trying to say is, I need to feel, as a heart leader, I need to feel the pulse. I can't live by the numbers. I have to understand the testimonies, the feedback, all those different things. Now, again, you can be trapped by that too, but you can also be tracked by analytics. That one of the things that I was reading about the other day in terms of marketing, and it just kept warning in this article that I was reading. It said you can get a lot of views, you can get a lot of impact, you can get a lot of followers, but you can lose your message.
For sure.
And I think there's a lot of people on social media, a lot of brands that are leaning into content, they're leaning into stories, they're leaning into memes and funny things or whatever it is, and they're getting a lot of traction. But when it comes to the core message of who they are, you have no idea what they stand for. And I think in the church, we can do the same thing. Is we can get caught up in trends, we can get caught up in, oh, this is how the other church is doing it, or this is the success that they're seeing. But that's not what God asked you to do. And
for sure.
Yesterday I was meeting with my counselor, and he gave me this freedom versus performance index. And he's like, are you trying to perform, or are you trying to walk in the grace and freedom that God's given you for that area? And I think that on the surface, they feel similar. But when you start to realize, am I doing this to just perform and check the box so that all these lives are being changed?
Right.
Or are you being driven? Like I think of people who are famous musicians who say, I did this for 20 years before I was famous. Why? Because I couldn't not do it.
Right.
This was what I had to be doing in my life. And I do think that there is this cost of just trying to chase after, well, this is what works, and this is what works for them, and this is what's getting me success or eyeballs. But is it actually creating the transformation that we're wanting to see? I don't know. I think at times we can miss the mark on that.
Yeah, I do. I do think security and discipline are two potential pitfalls of a strategic leader or a last minute visionary or catalytic leader. The strategic leader has to avoid the pitfall of I'm planning because I'm dealing with insecurity. And the catalytic heart leader that wants to change everything all the time, they have to avoid the pitfall of I change everything all the time because I really don't have any discipline. And I know that for me, there's been times in growing up in leadership that sometimes my randomness of like, what if we try this or what if we do that, is because there's lack of strategic discipline. But at the same time, I want to carry both. I want to become a better disciplined leader, and I want to operate not because I'm nervous about what everybody else is going to think about me or what they're going to say about me or that I'm going to be exposed or look dumb. I want to lead and make every decision out of like, nope, I know who I am. I'm confident in my giftings. I understand I have strengths and weaknesses, and I'm secure in that. And that's how I make decisions. So I want to grow in security and discipline.
That's good.
Terry, when you think about the ideas of even conceptually, like how you start planning, like how your mind works, I'd love maybe if we close with this because I want to make sure Kirk gets to his haircut.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And everybody watching,
look a little mangy.
I look like
gotta get rid of the mange.
No, I'm just kidding.
But like, what goes in your head? Like, maybe I'll just create a false scenario here to just hear like what goes in your head. But if we say, hey, we're trying to do, I don't know, a young men's night, like got teenagers and 15 maybe to 20 teenagers and young adults, a young men night where we're trying to mentor them, and we're thinking we don't have enough mentorship that's happening with our 15 to 20 year olds. Like, we're trying to do something for them. I'm making it up.
No, it's great.
Oh, dude,
I guess we're doing a new initiative.
Listen, you give a fake scenario like that, he can run for the next hour and a half.
No, I know, but we can run for a couple minutes.
How to build this out.
Just the hack for me is 5 simple steps. Vision, systems, behavior, culture, movement. I call it the movement theory. I know other people call movement theory something else. That's what I call movement theory. You just laid out the vision, right? The ultimate goal of that is that it becomes a self-perpetuating movement of the Holy Spirit and experiencing Jesus with young men of that age range.
Basically, you're saying like, you don't even need to put process in place because the glue is so together that mentorship is now part of our culture.
That's what you want. So that's the movement component. All right. When we often go from vision to movement, we say, let's just do it. But the planning piece is vision, systems, right? Systems create behavior, so people behave according to the vision. So when people aren't behaving according to the vision and the planning that you're getting going, you don't change the vision, you change the systems. Systems are disposable. right? If I want my child to be responsible and I'm giving them chores to be responsible and they don't do those chores, but yet I give them money, I just created a system for them to be irresponsible. I don't have an irresponsible kid. I created an irresponsible system. But say they don't do their chores and then I say, oh, I'm keeping your money for the next month until you start doing them again. I guarantee you they're going to start doing it, not because they're a good kid, but because they have a good system. So if I want young men to engage God and be in this culture of mentorship and everything else, I need to make sure that the systems I put in place get people behaving that way. But this is where a lot of churches stop, at modified behavior. Modified behavior isn't a movement. It's just modified behavior. People acting the way you train them to. So the only way to get behavior to move to culture is by speaking value into it. Why are we doing this? Celebrating it. Yes. Speaking value into it, attaching transformation to it and purpose to it. And then once everybody adopts that purpose, it goes from behavior to culture. Now, if you're in the whole process and the culture's not good, but the behavior is, change the values, speak into it, right? Until the culture matches the vision. Once all those are aligned, a movement is inevitable, but not until you're diligent with what? One thing, systems. God's job is the vision and the movement. The people's job is the behavior and the culture. Our one job as those who are stewarding people is systems that are disposable. It's kind of the expression of what it says in Ephesians, where he says God calls some to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, preachers, and teachers. Well, a lot of people look at it like it's a spiritual strengths finder. Like, what are you? I'm a pastor with a little bit of apostle, but don't tell anybody about the second part. No, you got to read the rest of the passage. It says to equip saints to do the work of the ministry. I don't get my well done, good and faithful servant for doing ministry. I get it for dispensing ministry. So how do I dispense it to the body of Christ? Through that.
You went so fast through movement theory, and I want people who are listening to really like go back and listen to that again, like rewind that, because you taught me that when I was 7 years ago when I first started.
Right.
And that's actually the framework that I built our young adult ministry off of. And I'm thinking, okay, we put the systems in place, but now I need to value it. I even think like if I can be candid with people who are listening, who are either a part of our church or in our church. Now we still have like 4,200 people in small groups at our church, which is amazing. But I think what would it take to get double that so that everyone on a weekend, is in a small group, or the 20,000+ people that would call it River Valley their home in a small group. But I think it's because we value global teams. We articulate that, kingdom builders. We send over 1,000 people a year internationally around the world. Like, that's crazy.
Right.
And so we are seeing what we value. But again, just for people who are wondering, man, that maybe is why, just because we had a good system is not why it's working. Kirk, when you think of the same scenario, obviously it's unless you have a counter 5 points of movement theory, but what goes in your head when I share that? Okay, we have 15 to 20 year olds. We want to get them mentored, kind of just back up all the way, from the start of the question. How does your brain work when that scenario kicks in?
Yeah, I think everything that Terry said, I agree with 100%. And Terry has helped us as River Valley Church architect a lot of our ministries, what you said about young adults. So I think me is like, first we're going to get Terry in the room to help us start architecting.
But like, I want to get in your head.
I understand that. But what is in my head is get the right group of people together that are gifted differently. I think if it's just me solely, the way that I would build any type of ministry, and I think we've talked about this on previous episodes, I'm looking for who are the influencers in our church, our community. So this is young men. Who are the influential young men that I can cast a fresh vision to? And side note, what is valued at River Valley? You talk about kingdom builders. It's what Pastor Rob bleeds. He doesn't bleed small groups to the same degree. He believes in it. So on paper, he believes in community, small group community. But what he bleeds is kingdom builders and the world to be reached for Jesus. So I think I'm going to try to internalize this fresh heart from God about mentoring young men. That I have to carry that as the leader authentically. I gotta get it in my gut. Like, I gotta feel that. Seek out the influencers, get them to a table of ownership. They get to be a part and participate and ideate and brainstorm. And this is what we're thinking. And as we're talking tonight, I've got 8 couples coming over, young couples coming over to our house to talk about the future of young adult ministry at our church. Some of them are on staff, some of them are not. And so I'm actively doing that and just kind of ideating what is the next phase of it. I don't know where that's going to go or what it's going to lead to, but trying to get the right people in the room. And then from there, they've got jobs, they've got ownership, they got something to do. And when you have an influencer that has been brainstorming, ideating, and has a job to do, now they're way more likely to evangelize. They're going to share, this is what's going on. Hey, did you hear about this? We could talk about the power of a whisper. Learned that from Pastor Rob. It's like,
we did
there's
that
some
on the
good
last
news.
episode you wore that shirt.
So the power of a whisper. So that stuff starts to leak. And all of a sudden there's these rumblings of God's doing this new thing and who's a part of it. And have you heard of it? We want you. And well, I want to know about that. And as soon as it's really, you know, and so that's probably a cheapened version of what actually happens over time. But I agree and am in alignment with a strategic thinker that can lay out movement theory and go, I want to follow that. What I expressed is kind of my part to play in movement theory.
Totally.
And I'll say to that, having a catalytic voice such as Kirk's is absolutely valuable, because what that does is it gets people in on what we're about to do and it gets them to bleed for it. And unless you bleed for something, you're not loyal to it. And so when he has people over at his house talking about the future of young adults, they're going to leave that place dreaming. And the minute they are given the go, they're going to be loyal to it. They're going to commit. They're going to give their time. Why? Because of somebody who's been able to hold the vision and invite other people into it well. Now, if Kirk was a closed-handed leader, he would have people over to hear his ideas and tell them to do it his way, but he's not. He's somebody who does this. And as he releases, people feel empowered and they want to run it. And I think that's the beautiful exchange between people like Kirk here, people like me, people like you, is if we all understand why we're in the room and why we're not, which is also important. When we understand that, and you want to talk about getting an initiative off the ground, it gets off the ground quicker when you're able to do those things well.
Totally. No, I hope people listening and watching realize, like, even seeing the two thought processes that you bring, what that harmony does is it elevates it, it accelerates it, all those words, it does everything to it. And I think one of the things that I try to do with Pastor Rob, who again leans that catalytic leader, is I try to resource him from a strategic standpoint to say, here's the gaps in movement theory or any type of thing that we're trying to do. I need you to bring that value into it, because I think this will move the needle forward. Now, if he doesn't understand why it's valuable, he's going to kind of give it what it is. I think of like a brand deal of like with somebody who's like a big famous influencer. If it's a brand deal and they just are like, hey, buy this product, it's really cool, this glass, you should, it's really great glass company, versus they understand the story, they understand how it's made, they realize why this glass is a totally different one and it actually is innovative, and they use it themselves, and they go, no, you don't understand, guys. They paid me, but I had this before they paid me. This was a company that I believe in. I believe in this product. I understand why it sets it apart. That is a complete shift. And I think in the church, a lot of times, whether we're the leader in charge, we need to understand so then we can add our weight behind it. But then on the other side, if we're pitching this up to leadership and saying, hey, I want you to push kids camp, I want you to push this. Well, we need to resource them with the area that's missing. Well, kids, you need to push kids camp. Well, is kids camp registration due today? Is it, that's the activator side of things. Well, why? Well, let me tell you a testimony of a kid who went on scholarship last year, who his life was completely changed. Okay, well, that's awesome. And then, hey, by the way, we see that when kids go to kids camp, they're 8 times more likely to be a part of our youth ministry going forward. Whatever that is, you have all 3 of those aspects. And so I see that in you guys constantly at our lead team meetings where I'll bring that up. But I hope today that people are left maybe feeling like they want more, and maybe we'll have to do another one.
Honestly, add a couple activators to this table, and we'd get some stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both. And
thank you.
I think this episode is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
Love you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to Talking Church on YouTube. If you like this podcast, would you like this video so more people can find it, as well as leave a comment? We'd love to know what you liked about this episode, what was most meaningful to you, as well as other topics you'd love to see in the future. And of course, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss an episode. We have awesome episodes coming up. I also want to send you an invitation to River Valley Conference. It's July 8th and 9th, and we are in for an amazing treat because we have Sammy Rodriguez coming. If you've never heard him preach, he is a preacher of all preachers. He's coming. We have Dr. Alan Tennyson coming back, who's going to share his theology wisdom. We have Johnsel and Jenna from Elevation Church that are going to be leading worship, and we're just so excited for all that's going to happen. Of course, Pastor Rob will be there. I'll be there. We'll have amazing breakout guests as well. So if you have not signed up, sign up for River Valley Conference, and we hope to see you here in July, and we hope to see you next week on next week's Talking Church episode.